So, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome Dr. Binoy. Uh, he's a consultant in hand surgery. He's working at Astra Medicity as well as St. James Hospital. So, uh, we are looking forward to learn from you, sir.
Yeah, so thank you, Balu. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So we'll be discussing on hand. So we'll be discussing like two topics, which are like desert and Antarctica, because totally different topics. One is wrist, and the other one is congenital hand differences. So the wrist X-ray, how you will read a wrist X-ray. So the first OSCE is on the wrist. So before that, because as a postgraduate, I was always confused how to read a wrist X-ray because it was all confusing. Hello.
Sir,
because it was all confusing. So it took some time for me to learn how to read a wrist X-ray. So I thought it will benefit you guys before starting the OSCE. So Dr. Jis also was of the same opinion, and I discussed it with Balu also. And the second one will be on the congenital hand anomalies. So the wrist is like mathematics. You understand the basics, you can use your logic, and you can identify any pathology. Whereas congenital hand anomalies is like history. You don't have any logic. You have to read, you have to see, and then only you will understand what is a congenital hand anomaly. So these are different things. So one is like maths, the other one is like history. So let's come to the wrist. We know that of all the injuries of hand, carpal injuries form a significant portion of the hand injuries, like almost like 18%. That's what the literature shows. But the problem with the wrist is it's like a jigsaw puzzle. So like a lot of bones, small bones, different shapes. So it's not like your phalanges or like the metacarpals, because those are straight bones and you never miss anything. So we can divide why we should be so cautious about the wrist injuries is because we have two types of injuries in wrist. If you see, one is forgiving injuries, other one is non-forgiving injuries, unforgiving injuries. So let's see what are the forgiving injuries. So the forgiving injuries are those injuries, even if we miss, patient is still going to get a good outcome. Unforgiving injuries are those which if you miss the injury, then the patient is going to suffer his whole life. So let's see this one. So all of you can see there is a line in the scaphoid, and this guy came to us in the month of September. Then when we said surgery, he was not willing. Then he went back, and you see he has come back to us almost 5 months later with a non-union. So even if he had missed the fracture, even if we had told him that it is okay, we still can get a good outcome with a vascularized bone grafting. You can see that it is united well. So, and he has a good function as well. So the next forgiving wrist injury is a scapholunate ligament injury. You can always miss the scapholunate injury unless we take a stress view. That is a clench fist view. So still we can do a reconstruction. We can use the FCR, we can fix it, and we can still get a good function with it. You can see the range of movement he has, almost near full movements he has, full rotations he has. So these are the kind of results we get even if we do the surgeries late. But what are the unforgiving injuries? Unforgiving injuries are those like perilunate and lunate dislocations. We know that the diagnosis of perilunate and lunate dislocation is missed in up to 25% of cases. That means every 4 patients who comes to the casualty, 1 case is missed. And the resultant delay of treatment affects the clinical results. So the literatures, many articles have shown that if you have a more than 1 week delay, it is a bad prognosis. More 56% of patients end up with a post-traumatic arthritis with just 1 week delay. So the long-term outcome also in missed perilunate injuries is poor because of damage to the ligamentous architecture of carpus. So if we get promptly recognize and treat it, we get a near normal function also for this. You can see this is a perilunate. I'll show you how to read these X-rays. So this is a perilunate, and this is the after the fixations. This is after the removal, and you can see the results he has. He has a good function. We actually had opened both dorsal and volar, which is a standard approach, and he has a good flexion extension and pronation supination, and you can also see that his grip strength is almost the same as the opposite side. So that is the kind of results we get if we treat them on time. So what is the scope of the talk? Scope of the talk is not go into the intricate details of the radiology of the wrist, not to tell you so that this many ligaments are there in the wrist. These are the angles, these are the confusing angles, these are the straight angles, nothing. The idea is to prevent us missing a carpal injury while we are managing a trauma. So the wrist X-ray is superimposed and it's jumbled up. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle, as I said. So what is the key to solve the jigsaw puzzle is to be systematic. So we need to follow 6 steps in a wrist X-ray. First is the correct view. You have to make sure the view you have taken is the correct view. Step 2 is to localize the carpal bones in PA, not in AP. Step 3 is to localize the carpal bones in lateral. Step 4 is to localize the carpal bones in oblique. So you understand now we have 3 standard X-rays. Any wrist, you have to take a PA, lateral and oblique. Step 5 is to analyze for pathology, and step 6 if required, special views, CT or MRI. So first step 1, that is get a good X-ray. So we need to get a PA view and we need to get a true lateral view. So we'll come later how we decide if it's a true PA view, if it's a true lateral view. And this is a PA in ulnar deviation, which we also call the scaphoid view. And oblique view, we should always take a pronation oblique. Pronation oblique is the one which shows us the scaphoid clearly, the trapezium clearly, the trapezoid clearly. If you take a supination oblique, you will see the pisiform, and people can even confuse it with a dislocation, and you can get a call from unnecessary call from the casualty telling one carpal bone is outside. So it's a pronation oblique. So never take a hand X-ray with a wrist X-ray. That is a false sense of economy at the risk of missing an injury at the wrist. So as I said, how many views we should take? Minimum, we need 2 views. We need a PA and lateral. Standard wrist views are PA, lateral and oblique. Special views are ulnar deviation PA and clenched fist PA. So do we take a AP or a PA view? We have to take a PA view because PA is the one which gives the more visibility to the bones. AP is best to determine the scapholunate and lunotricutal intervals. So how we know if it's an AP or a PA view? AP view, you see that the styloid is at the center, whereas in the PA it is towards the ulnar border, and you can see the ECU groove also. So these are the 2 things which tells you it's a PA view. One is ulnar styloid at the ulnarmost end and the ECU groove. So that is the ulnar styloid and this is the ECU groove. So how we know if it's a true lateral view? True lateral view should have the radius, capitate and metacarpal in a single line, plus the volar border of the pisiform should be midpoint between the scaphoid and the capitate, as you can see in this. So that is a true lateral view. You will never see pisiform in a true lateral view. I mean, jetted out in a true lateral view. So this is the line and this is the pisiform. So what do we see if it's not true lateral? So when we see there is more supination, the more the pisiform projects palmar to the scaphoid. And even the lunate may appear falsely tilted dorsally, as you can see in this. So you can feel that there is a DC, there is a dislocation. Though it is a normal X-ray, you may confuse it with a pathology. So we are done with the view part, X-ray view. Next is to localize the carpal bones. That is in the PA. So identifying the carpal bones in the PA, you know this is scaphoid, which is close to the radial styloid. We do the special views for scaphoid because it is not a straight bone. And you can see this is a normal PA view, and this is the ulnar deviation view. So you can see the fracture, which we think is a doubtful fracture, which is shown quite clearly in the ulnar deviation view. That is the importance of the ulnar deviation view. Next comes the lunate. So this is the normal shape of the lunate. It should be like a trapezoidal. So if you see any change in shape of the lunate, so in this you can see it is a triangular lunate. It's not a trapezoidal. So that means there is something wrong. So next come the other bones. We have the trapezium, we have the capitate, we have the hamate, we have the triquetrum and the pisiform. Next is the localize the carpal bones lateral view. So which is quite a tricky part. We need to keep on exercising. We keep on reading the wrist X-rays to see them quite well. So this is the lunate, which is quite familiar to all of us. Next comes the most of the time, sometimes the patient comes with a fall with on a hand, and you will see a small fleck of bone on the dorsal side. That is most often from the triquetrum. Next comes the next bump is the hamate, and the last one is the capitate. So we know in the lateral view, which we can see clearly, one pathology is the lunate dislocation. So the lunate is compared to the apple in the saucer. When there is a lunate dislocation, it's called a spilt teapot sign. So this is a lunate dislocation, and this is a perilunate dislocation. So that is something confusing to many people. In a lunate dislocation, the lunate sits in the lunate fossa and the carpus around it dislocates. Whereas in the lunate dislocation, the lunate itself dislocates. So that is almost the end stage of lunate dislocation, is the last stage of perilunate dislocation. So next is the localize the carpal bones oblique. Oblique view we usually use to identify three bones, that is the scaphoid. Next is the trapezium and the trapezoid, which you don't see clearly in the other views. Next is to analyze for pathology. So to analyze, we need to look at few things. One is the arc, next is the spaces, and comes the parallelism. So these are the arcs. As you all know, there are three arcs, Gilula's arcs. One is from the proximal border of proximal carpal row. Next is on the distal part of distal carpal row, and the third one is on the proximal part of distal carpal row. Next is the spaces. Spaces should be roughly 2 millimeters between the carpal bones. Next is the parallelism. The bones inside the joint has to be parallel to each other. So in this X-ray, you can see there is a disruption of arc 1, so which is the proximal border of the proximal carpal row. Though the distal carpal row is also disrupted, it is more obvious on the proximal row. So this is an example of disruption of arc 2. So arc 2 is disrupted when you have a, in this case, there is a scaphoid fracture as well. So next comes the disruption of arc 3. Arc 3 was from the proximal border of those kind of injuries usually seen with the blast injuries, which we get to see in and around Chalakudi, where people uses bombs to chase away the wild animals. So next comes the special views, CT or MRI. So we use CT or MRI because the carpal bones are overlapping bones with three-dimensional geometry. So sometimes we can miss a fracture line. So when the X-ray is normal and the patient is still having pain, so it is always better to ask for a special view, CT or MRI. So let's come to the OSCEs. So who would like to tell me what is wrong with the X-ray?
If someone can volunteer.
I think I'll call. I'll Amritaraj. Amritaraj. So that is like in the school they randomly call somebody. No, same thing we'll do here also.
So
Yes, Amritaraj.
ARC
Can
2
you,
is
can you,
disrupted, sir.
yeah, no, you have to comment. There are 6 steps, no? You have to tell me if it's the correct view. You have to identify the bones in the, so there are few steps which I told, no? 6 steps I told you. So can you tell me if it's the correct view?
Yes, sir. It's a PA view, sir.
Why it's a PVA, not an AP view?
Because we can see ulnar styloid at the lateral side, sir.
Okay, there is no lateral for the wrist. There is ulnar and radial. Okay.
Ulnar styloid on the ulnar side, sir.
Okay.
Then.
So this is the correct view.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what all things you see? So like in the X-ray, and what is your diagnosis?
From this X-ray, ARC 2 is disrupted, sir.
ARC 1?
ARC 1 is maintained, sir. Almost maintained.
Okay.
ARC 2 is disrupted.
Okay.
Then.
So can you comment what is the pathology in this?
Comment the pathology. I need a lateral view, sir.
Yeah, excellent, man. So you should always ask for a second view. I think Sai Krishnan will tell us what is wrong with the X-ray. Sai Krishnan, you are there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, man. Tell me what is wrong with X-ray. Did you listen to the wrist X-ray reading? I mean the part. Hello. You were there when I was discussing the wrist X-ray.
X-ray wrist bilateral view.
PA. It's not an AP. It's a PA.
PA lateral view.
Okay.
Showing lunate dislocation.
Okay.
With lunate dislocation.
So Jitin, do you agree with him? What he is telling?
No, sir.
Now, what is your where you disagree with him?
He's telling that it's a lunar dislocation, but it's not a completely lunar dislocation. It's a perilunar dislocation.
Very good, man.
There were no filled T-port signs, sir.
Okay. So why you are telling it's not a lunate? It's a perilunate. What is the difference between
still in the carpal fossa, sir?
Very good. Okay. So
While in lunar dislocation, it will be outside the carpal fossa.
Yeah, so that is the basic difference, Sai Krishnan. In the lunate dislocation, the lunate will come out of the lunate fossa. That is the end stage of perilunate. So that is not a different thing. That is a part of perilunate, but that is the end stage of perilunate. The last ligament to fail is the radiolunate ligaments. So when those ligaments fail, the lunate actually collapse into the forearm. So that is called a lunate dislocation. So now Philip will tell us the diagnosis anyway. Philip. Philip, you are there? Philip. So Akhil, can you tell us? Akhil, you are there? Jerry, maybe you will be able to tell us. Jerry Gabriel.
Yes, sir, it's a perilunate dislocation
Okay.
with and it is a dorsal displacement of the capitate.
Okay. So you can see. So you can see that there is a. You can see that. So there is a scaphoid. Margins are scaphoid is kind of irregular. So you can always suspect a so in the PA view, when you go from radial to ulnar side, you can see that there is a scaphoid irregularity, and you can always suspect a scaphoid fracture. Okay. And there is a disruption in the Gillila's arc, and there is no parallelism. Ideally, the carpal bone has to be parallel to each other, and there is no parallelism. And if you see the lateral view, you can see that the capitate is dislocated dorsally, but the lunate is still in the fossa. So from this X-ray, it may be difficult to comment the scaphoid if there is a fracture or not. But can we diagnose for sure? Can we tell that there is a scaphoid fracture? Sajil, can you tell us like how we can, from the X-ray itself, if can we tell there is a scaphoid fracture? Is there a way?
Actually, we can see the fracture line in the PAV, sir.
Okay.
The two poles
But
are
it can be,
dislocated.
but it's like confusing, no? Whether there is a fracture or there is no fracture. So
yes, sir.
can we do something and then make it more clear? Is there a
Ulnar
way?
deviation.
Sir, scaphoid view on, sir. Ulnar deviation.
No, it's not the scaphoid view.
Clenched fist view, sir.
No, basically we need to reduce it.
Okay.
We have to reduce it in the casualty, and if you do the repeat X-ray, then you will see the scaphoid well. So that is one way of identifying. The other way is to get a CT done. Okay. So let's come to the revise it. So we see that it is a correct view. So then we localize the carpal bones in the PA, then the lateral view, then we analyze so we saw that there is a scaphoid fracture. We see that the lunate shape is not trapezoidal anymore. And we saw in the lateral view that the capitate has dislocated dorsally. And we have come to the diagnosis of transcaphoid perilunate. So the conclusion is that the wrist X-ray can be challenging, but a systemic approach can organize the chaos. And the unforgiving injuries, that is a transcaphoid perilunate and perilunate, these are provide near normal function if we detect them and treat them early. So next we'll come to the boring part of OSCE, that is a congenital hand. So we'll ask George, what is this, man? What is the photo you are looking at? George, you are there? Shinos, can you tell us what is this?
Sir, hello, sir. Is that syndactyl?
No. See, Mohanlal cinema പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട് ഒരു ചോദ്യത്തിന്റെ ഉത്തരം വേറെ ചോദ്യമാണ്. So you have to tell me if what it is. So you think it's a syndactyl? So who is this M30? What is his name? So there is one person in the group, M30. Ranjit, can you tell us what is this? Ranjit, you are there?
Yes. Yes, sir, I'm there.
Yeah. So can you tell us what it is?
Acrosyndactyly.
Sorry?
Acrosyndactyly. Not sure.
Acrosyndactyly. Okay. So who can tell me what the difference between syndactyly and acrosyndactyly? Jijin.
Sir, in acrosyndactyly, there will be fusion at the distal and to proximal end, there will be finish pressure.
Okay. Jijin. Jijin, you are there, Jijin? So, okay. So the question is, what is the condition known as? Okay, so as you thought, this is syndactyly. Okay. Now, who is going to tell me which is the most commonly involved web space? Shyam?
Second and third.
Second and third means second, you are counting from the little finger side or from the thumb side?
From the thumb side.
Okay.
So it is the middle and the ring finger.
So that means it is the third and fourth, you are telling. Or the index and the middle?
The third and fourth.
Third and fourth. Okay, okay. So, what is your take, Jins Wilson? Is he telling the correct thing? The answer is correct? Jins, you are there?
Yes, sir, I am here.
So, what is he telling the correct? Is it more common between the middle and ring finger? So, or I'll ask you the next question.
Sir. More common middle and ring finger, sir.
Okay. So, I think then you should be knowing what is the difference between a complete and incomplete syndactyly.
Incomplete, the fingers are joined all the way till the tip.
Okay.
Whereas in it is the DAP joints will be free. Only the
Deals with no areas of suppression and incomplete deals with the passive suppression.
Sorry?
Incomplete means deals with the passive suppression and complete with deals with the no areas of suppression.
No, I didn't understand. Like complete means you are telling the both fingers are fused till the tip.
Complete.
Okay. So can you tell me then what is simple and complex syndactyly?
Only two digits, sir. I don't know.
Okay, that is actually a little difficult question anyway. So this is what is an incomplete syndactyly and a complete syndactyly. So in an incomplete syndactyly, as you said, it is the digits are not fused together. So even if it is fused till there, till the nail bed level, then you call it a incomplete syndactyly. So when it is fully, both fingers are together, we call it a complete syndactyly. Okay, understood? Next thing is the simple syndactyly. Simple syndactyly means there is fusion only between the soft tissues. Okay. So in a complex syndactyly, there is fusion between the bones. Okay. Is that clear?
yes, sir.
So again, we'll go. This is a syndactyly because there is fusion between the two fingers. Okay. So both fingers are fused together. So the most commonly involved is the middle and the ring finger. This is the most commonly involved digits, syndactylies. So when you have skin, it is fused incompletely. It is called incomplete syndactyly. When it is fully fused, we call it a complete syndactyly. Next is the simple and the complex. Simple, there is no bone effusion. It's only the skin which is involved. In the complex, it is called a bones are involved. And there was one more thing, that acrosyndactyly. Acrosyndactyly, what Jitin was telling was correct. So the only thing is, it is more common when you have in cases with congenital band syndrome. So who is going to tell me what this is? Anto? Anto, can you tell us what it is?
Band syndrome.
Sorry?
Band syndrome.
What band, man? You have to be specific, no? What band it is?
Constriction band.
So there is one guy who has not put his name but has put as K. Who is that? Dheeraj, can you tell us what it is? Devraj, sorry. Devraj. Nag Sanjeev.
There is constriction band syndrome or amniotic band syndrome.
Okay. Yeah, so very good, man. So this is a constriction band syndrome. So what causes this condition? Amritraj, what causes this condition?
Intrauterine.
Sorry?
Intrauterine constriction.
Intrauterine constriction, like what constrict it? What causes the constriction? Jerry Gabriel, can you tell us what causes this condition?
Fibrous bands of amniotic fluid entangle around the leg.
Exactly. So very good. So what happens is there are many theories put forward for the constriction band, but the most acceptable is the one what he has told now, that is the amniotic bands constrict around the extremities. It can be the upper limb, it can be the lower limb. So like who can tell me any one technique to release this, name of one technique of releasing it? Akhil, can you tell me the name, any one name for the technique for this releasing? Philip Podumana, can you tell me? Who can tell me one technique, one name of only any one technique of releasing it?
Z-plasty.
So Amritraj, no?
Yes.
Very good, Amritraj. So that is, we can release it in different methods. So one popular method is a Z-plasty. So in the picture, what you see is a Z-plasty. You put the incisions like a Z, then you release it, and so the constriction actually will get better with a Z-plasty. So, Anto, can this child, presented to the OP, the child was around 2 years. The mother was telling she is not able to extend his thumb. She said she noticed it only one year back. What do you think it is? Hello, Anto?
Sir. Sir,
Anto.
hearing.
What is it, Anto? Hello, Anto.
Hello.
And then Anto.
Sir, congenital trigger.
Congenital trigger thumb. Okay, Robert.
Good evening, sir. It's a congenital trigger thumb, sir.
Congenital trigger thumb. Okay. So you have identified the condition. So my next question is it congenital? So you all were telling it's congenital. So is it congenital? M30? Who is M30? Is he here? Balu, we need to find out who this M30 is.
Yes, we'll ask them to rename.
So Shinas, is it congenital?
Sir, I don't know.
Okay. Maybe Devraj will tell us. Anyway, Robert feels it is congenital. Anto also was telling it's congenital.
It's occurred, sir. It's a misnomer.
Who is this? Jitin? Yeah. Well, why it is like, why you are telling it's acquired, not congenital?
Because it's an abnormal thickening of the FPL tendon.
Okay.
And initially, the flexion of IP joint will be normal, but
Okay.
usually it is find out after 1 or 1.5 years
Okay.
after birth.
Okay.
It is a congenital condition. It will be present from the birth itself, sir.
Yes. So many studies, they have done, like, which involves 5,000 children in like Japan and US. They found that it is not congenital. So now the latest dictum is not to use congenital trigger thumb. They found that many children actually develop it over the time. So it is not congenital. So the next question is, suppose if the child comes to you in 3 months, 3-month-old child, how long you will wait to intervene? Jins Wilson, you want to operate at 3 months or you want to wait? If you want to wait, how long you will wait?
2 years.
2 years. Why 2 years, man? Do you have any reason in mind for 2 years?
Sir, most of the cases it will resolve within 2 years.
Oh, this is Anto?
Yes, sir.
Okay, like 2 years it will resolve. Like, okay. So that is a good answer. Like we can actually wait till 2 years because most cases can actually resolve over the time. So we don't need to hurry for the surgery. So I think Ando has read about trigger thumb, so I'm not going to ask him anything. So we'll ask Shyam. Shyam, what is the name of the nodule which caused this condition? So Jitin was telling that there is a thickening and it causes this trigger thumb and all. So Jitin and Ando has read trigger thumb, so there is no point asking them, no? So I'll ask you.
Sorry, sir. I'm not sure.
Not sure. Okay. Sanjeev, Nag Sanjeev.
I don't know, sir.
Philip Pudumana. Ranjit.
No.
Who was that? Ranjit.
Jijin, sir.
Sorry? Jijin. Very good, man. Next, Oski comes to you. So that's called a Nota's nodule. Okay, Gigi, tell me what it is. Do you see anything? Do you see anything? Is there anything abnormal about
Yes.
this? What is abnormal about this?
So, there's a flexion contraction.
Flexion contraction.
IP joint of both little fingers.
Okay. Yeah. So there is a flexion contracture of the little finger. Okay.
Yes.
So so there is Balu. There is this guy called who was named as S. Yes, you are there.
So I'll just message.
No. Like, yeah. So K is there, S is there. K, you can answer K. What it is?
Sir, K, our first name in the starting, sir.
Allah, but I can't call him, no?
Sir, K is Karthik M.
Karthik M. No. Okay, Karthik, tell me what it is, man. What do we find here?
Flexion contracture of both the little fingers.
Okay. So what is it called? Is there any particular name, or is it just a flexion contracture? So the scenario is like a 16-year-old girl presented with flexion deformity of both little fingers. Parents says they noticed the deformity when she was 8 years of age. They say there was no history of trauma. And when she became adolescent, there was actually a progression. So can we trust what they say? So what do you think it is? So a 16-year-old girl developed a flexion deformity at 8 years, progressed when she became adolescent. So who can tell me the diagnosis?
Clinodactyl.
May I know who it was?
Sir, Shinas.
Shinas. No, it's not clinodactyly, but you are close enough. So this is a camptodactyly. Okay. So the deformity is called a camptodactyly. So which is the most commonly involved finger genes?
I don't know, sir.
Ranjit.
Don't know.
Okay, so the little finger is the most commonly involved. Who can tell me any two hypotheses for this deformity? When I was looking through the DNB papers in the theory, this comes as a short note, I think. Name any two hypotheses for this deformity. Any two. Jijin.
Don't know, sir.
Okay, so I'll just brief you on that. So this is I'm giving a little bit of theory also because you guys are going for exams soon, so you may not have your time to read all these things also. So it is a painless flexion contracture of the PAP joint that, if untreated, can progress and produce a cosmetic and functional problems. So most of the children present without a swelling. So they will just tell that the finger has actually going bending over the time. So you can see that the MCP and the DAP joints are not affected. It is only the PAP joint. Okay, so that is one thing you can differentiate. It is like if people can actually suspect it for a Boutonniere deformity and all. So in Boutonniere, you can see, you know that there will be a hyperextension at the PAP joint. So there can be second compensatory deformities, but otherwise it is only the PAP which is involved in a camptodactyly. So on very few people gets affected, less than 1%. Most of the cases it is bilateral, and little finger is the one which is most commonly involved. So the frequency reduces towards the radial side of the hand. So it is more common on the ulnar side. So most cases are sporadic. You can inherit as an autosomal dominant trait. The precise etiology is often not known. So nobody knows what exactly is the pathology. Some says it is an anomalous joint architecture. Some says it is a laxity. Some says there is a facial bands, abnormal flexor tendons, but most common intraoperative findings are two. So if somebody asks you in what like most common pathologies, you can tell an absent or an anomalous FDS tendon. So you can think that the FDS attached to the middle phalanx. So if it is anomalous and if it is tight, the child won't be able to straighten the finger. Again, if the lumbricals are the one which keeps your PIP joint straight, it is not the extensor tendon. So if there is a lumbrical anomaly, then the patient won't be able to extend the finger. So flexor tendon, so you have two reasons. One, there is a problem with the flexion, that is the FDS. Then there is a problem with the extension. So this is the classification. So type 1, it is the child is born with the deformity. Most often it is 2 fingers, ring and little fingers. Type 2, they usually present at 7 to 11 years of age. There will be absolutely no history of trauma. The deformity actually can get worse as the child grows. Type 3 is present from the birth, but it is always syndromic. So we treat it with a Z-plasty and the release of the FDS tendon. So who is going to tell me this? What is wrong with the problem? Who will tell me? Any volunteers? Both hands are normal? Shinas?
Sir.
രണ്ട് കൈയും ഒരുപോലെയാണ്, വ്യത്യാസം ഉണ്ടോ?
Size of the index finger is big.
Yeah, the right side index finger is big.
Big.
Yeah, so exactly. So any particular term for that, like big, like fingers, big hand?
Macro.
What was that? Endo?
Acron.
Macro.
Sorry? Amritaraj. Who was telling this?
Macro.
Dactyly, exactly, man. Very good. So that is a macrodactyly. Okay. So macro means big. So dactyly is a finger. So it's a macrodactyly. So I'll tell you a few points about the macrodactyly because I know the congenital hand is a difficult topic. You guys read. So it is a descriptive term used for a disproportionately large finger or a body part from birth or that develops within the first years of life. Both soft tissue and skeletal elements are enlarged in the affected digits. Index is the most commonly involved finger. Enlargement of multiple digits is more common than enlargement of a single digit. Most often it will be the thumb, index and the middle finger. So that is like the median nerve territory. So most cases are sporadic. So there are different etiologies, but most consistent finding we see is a lipofibromatosis of the nerve. So when there is a lipofibromatosis of the median nerve, there will be enlargement of thumb, index and the middle fingers. So this is the classification. So again, macrodactyly I saw in the DNP papers as a short note. So that's why I just came to the classification. So type 1 is associated with lipofibromatosis of the nerve. Type 2 is with the neurofibromatosis. Type 3 is with the digital hyperostosis and type 4 is hemihypertrophy. So we have, these are the treatments. We have treatment to limit the ongoing growth, like digital nerve stripping and epiphysiodesis, and procedures that reduce the size of the digit, like debulking. You take out the fat, you take out all the loose tissues around, and you debulk it. And we can have procedures that can correct the deviation, like osteotomies. And last, sometimes it is so big that it is very difficult to get a good debulking and make it to a aesthetically pleasing this thing. So amputation is also one option. So Jijin, you are there?
Yes, sir.
What is this name? Cherry Gabriel. Karthik.
Radial aplasia.
Sorry?
Radial
Radial?
aplasia, charge syndrome.
Sir, I didn't hear.
So radial aplasia charge syndrome.
Okay. Shyam, can you tell me what it is?
I'm seeing a hyperplastic thumb.
Okay, very good.
And absent thumb over the right finger, right hand.
Okay, very good.
And absent radius also.
Okay, so what do we call this condition?
Radial hemimelia.
Yeah.
Radial hemimelia.
And club.
Yeah, this is the radial club band. Okay. So who can tell me any two syndromes associated? There are a lot of syndromes associated. Any two syndromes? Who can tell me?
Backup syndrome, Charles syndrome.
Sorry?
Backup syndrome.
Sorry, what syndrome?
Like vertebral defect, canal atrasia, Backup syndrome.
Yeah, you have your
Charles syndrome.
Bacterial syndrome. Very good, man. So what is Bacterial syndrome?
Vertebral defects.
Okay.
Canal atrasia. Tracheoesophageal atrasia.
Sorry?
Esophageal.
No, B is for the vertebral, A is for the anal, C is for the C is for the cardiac anomalies. T is for the tracheoesophageal. Yeah.
R for retinal.
Sorry, R for?
Retinal. Renal.
Sorry?
Renal defects.
Renal. Yes.
Renal defects.
Yes. Yeah. So that is a Bacterial syndrome. And can you tell me one more syndrome?
Charles syndrome.
Sorry?
Charles syndrome. Thrombocytopenia, Tarson radius.
What syndrome? TAR.
Charles.
Thrombocytopenia absent. CA?
Yeah. Thrombocytopenia is absent radius.
Yeah, thrombocytopenia and absent radius. Okay. So how do you work up, like when the child comes, what all things you will do? So basically you need to work up because there will be a lot of syndromic associations with the radial club band. Okay. So I'll just give you a brief about the radial club band. So these are Basically, what you need to understand is that the aplasia starts from the radial side and it is progressed to the ulnar side. Okay. So it will be the thumb will be affected, your radial side carpals will be affected, the radius itself will be affected on the bone side. And the soft tissue side, it is the tendons. And the nerve side, it can even involve the median nerve. So these are the three syndromes which you can remember: Vactral, Holt-Oram, and Fanconi. So this also, I think, comes as a short note for you guys. So this is the classification. I'll tell you how to remember it easily. So you have basically 6 types, type N to type 4. So you need to type thumb, carpus, distal radius, and proximal radius. Okay. So in N, only thumb is hypoplastic or absent. In type 0, only, next level it comes to the thumb and carpus. Type 1, it will involve the distal radius. Type 2, so it is actually progressing from the, as you can see, it is progressing from the thumb to the carpus, to the distal radius, to the proximal radius. So the classification is known as Bain and Cluck classification. So the treatment is like for the first 3 types, where child has more of a thumb problem and the radius is almost like normal, so they won't have much deformity. So you manage it with a stretching and splinting. So the radius deformity starts with the type 2, where you start with a radius lengthening. Type 3 and 4, the radius is so small you can't lengthen it. So you need to correct the deformity by the transverse or a procedure called centralization. So in the exam, I'm not sure if they will ask you, they call the centralization and radialization. The difference is the child will have only one bone, that is the ulna. So if you keep the carpus in the center of ulna, it is called a centralization. So it is the middle finger metacarpal will come in line with the ulna. If the middle finger metacarpal comes in line with the ulna, it is called a centralization. If the index finger metacarpal comes in line with the ulna, it is called a radialization. So these are the 2 procedures. Previously, people used to perform radialization, but now everyone has shifted to centralization, because ultimately the centralization fails and the carpus shift radially. So the deformity will be less when you do a centralization. So thank you. It was such a boring topics and congenital hand differences. Thank you all for your kind listening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for really going through the very important topic on radiological analysis also. And I think these OSCEs are really important. This is very commonly kept for the DNB sessions also. So thank you so much, sir, for sharing your time with us. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Binoy. It is a really difficult one, and you made it very interesting, and you really made them answer. That's really a good teacher can only do that. So we look forward for more of your sessions whenever you're free.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
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 Thank you, sir.